everyone. So glad that you're here with me. I'm Shannon Kiebler. I'm the moderator of our Math Expressions user group on Facebook and the creator of the Math Genius Squad, a professional development for Math Expressions users. And I'm thrilled you're here. So we are talking tonight about fingers. So let me know who you are, where you're watching. Let me know what grade you teach. And I am going to share some information tonight that might be a bit controversial for things that maybe you've thought in the past or maybe have been guilty of with your students. And I want to just preface this by saying that we do better when we know better. And we're not going to go back in time and say, oh, I did that, I feel so bad. No, you're just going to move forward. And we're going to try to implement these best practices and answering this main question today, which is, should students use their fingers? And I'm going to say absolutely yes, they should. We want students using their fingers all the time. So our fingers are not to be shamed in the classroom. So raise your hand if you've ever said, don't count on your fingers, don't use your fingers. You should just know this now. You should have it in your head. Okay. Any of those statements we're saying because we're not actually frustrated that they're using their fingers. We're frustrated that they're using their fingers inefficiently. And we're frustrated that what we think should be mental math doesn't appear to be. Okay, so let's talk about when we should use our fingers and how we can use our fingers. All right, so we're going to talk about the pros. We're going to talk about 3 counting levels and how they work for kindergarten through 2nd grade, and they repeat themselves in 3rd through 6th. And then we work on when it becomes inefficient. So student fingers are their first internal number line and their most trusted tool. So I want you to think about when kindergartners are learning, preschoolers, toddlers are learning to count, and they look at their fingers. This is, even in Montessori land, their first number line, whether they're counting 1 or 5, 6, or they count starting their thumb first, 1, 2, 3. Think about when they're looking at their hand, it's still normally starting from the left and going to the right. Okay, even if they start with this finger, this hand, and then they go on with this hand, they still started with something that started on the left side of their body. Now, they might even go, some kids even go like this. It doesn't really matter. So whether they start with their thumb or they start with their pinky or they start with their right hand or they start with their left hand, what we know is this is a tool that can be trusted. It's how we keep track of things. It's how we learn rote counting, rational counting. There's so many skills that are learned with our fingers. So we teach kids in kindergarten to almost always use their fingers. We're like, show me the story with your fingers. Like there was 3 and there was 2. How many are there all together? I want you to count forward. I want you to count backwards. Their finger is their very first math tool, and it's what they come to learn and rely on as a trusted tool. So you can see why there's some confusion as we get into some of the older grades and we say, stop using your fingers. We've been telling them to use their fingers and that they can trust their fingers. Okay, so we know that this is their first internal number line. We know that it's a trusted tool. So how do we get students to use these in a way that's going to be most beneficial? Because a lot of students don't use them efficiently. So let's talk first about these counting levels. Okay, counting all, counting on, and derived strategies. So let's walk through each one of them. So counting all. Okay, this would be when our sweet kinder friends say, I have 3 plus 2. I got 3 apples. My grandpa gave me 2 apples. How many apples do I have together? And they're going to count everything, all of the quantities. So they might go 1, 2, 3, and then they might count their 2, 1, 2. And then in order to figure out how many there are together, they start over with the count. And they'll say 1, 2, 3. So it's one object per word. That includes rational counting. Okay, I know that I can only say 1 for this finger and 1 for this finger and 1 for this finger. It's helping with rote counting, knowing number, word, order, just learning it. We don't want kids to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and they just kind of randomly put up fingers and it doesn't match the number that they're putting up. So it should be 1, 2, 3. Just like if I were to count my pens or my pencils, 1, 2. Okay, one object per finger. That's count all. Then we move to count on, which they start to learn in kindergarten, but really it's a 1st grade skill where students start to conserve numbers, because you can see if that's what we're going to do with our fingers of counting all, kids that are not taught or pushed to move beyond that level, they start running out of fingers and toes. So now we do something like 7 plus 8, and they can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then they're like, okay, add 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so we have to push them of like, well, we have to now get our brain to hold on. We trust it. And we only trust it because we've done it so many times in kindergarten. And we do really trust that number 7 was 7. And now I can just hold it in my hand. So now I might say, or hold it in my head. So I might put it in my head. So I'm just going to hold that 7 there because I counted it out so many times. I believe it. I trust it. But could I count and hold that 7 and now count forward, let's say 8 more? So they'd count their 8 and they'd say now 7 and they'd count forward. 9, 10, again, right? So they're going to count all the way until they get here to 15. And they're like, oh, it's just 15. It's the last word I said when I ran out of fingers. Now, there's cardinality. There's some other skills that are actually pretty important in that whole sequence, but we're teaching kids, you don't actually have to count all of the fingers all of the time. You can count forward. So even later on in first grade, when they're starting at like 97, I'm like, count from 97 more. They're still learning that count sequence, but they don't have to count 97 on their fingers. They trust the 97, and now we count forward. You and I do that like in the grocery store all the time. Do we not? Okay, I'm trying to keep track of how many I have in my cupboard, or, well, then if I added 3 more on that side, and then I do, right? We keep track with our fingers. So shaming them is sending a message we do not want to send. Okay, you and I don't do all of our math in our brain, right? We want kids to know, of course you should use your fingers. It's a math tool, but how do we use it efficiently? So do I want you counting every single quantity? No. Now that I'm in first and second grade, I want you to count on. Now this is going to continue when we get into third, fourth, and fifth. Watch how it changes. So now I get to derive strategies. I'm in second grade and I say, well, you have 7 plus 8. Okay. Even counting on 8 more, you can do it. You can be effective. The problem is it's starting to become inefficient because 1, as I get into those teen numbers, I start running out of fingers. And 2, it's a lot to count on 8 more or 9 more. So we start to make a general rule that we only want you counting on with your fingers if it's 5 or less, because counting on for numbers that are over 5 becomes inefficient. And now I need you to use your fingers in a more efficient way. So let's go back to 7 plus 8. Now I have 7 plus 8, and I might say, let's go ahead and choose that bigger number. Let's choose 8. And I know I have to add 7, but instead of going 8 and 11, 12 and moving forward, I'm going to say, let's use those fingers more efficiently and say, well, 7 or 8 and what makes a 10? Let's get to 10 fit quickly. Instead of going 8, 9, 10, I'm going to say, oh, I already know that 2 makes a 10. So 8 and 2 makes a 10. Add 5 more makes 15. So now I start using that subitizing, the conceptual subitizing, as I break things into groups. I'm like, well, 7 is just a 5 and a 2, and I can use 2 of those to make a 10. I'd have 5 left over. Now I could go 10, 11, 12. Some kids are still there where they still have to count forward. But by second grade, we're starting to push them to say, you can just see the 5 now, still use your fingers, but just know 10 and 5, we know that. That's 15. Now, all of it repeats itself come third grade because now we do multiplication. So let's talk about this because this is a big one for our upper grade teachers. They're like, stop counting on your fingers. I'm like, no, please count on your fingers. Just do it more efficiently. So we learned very early on, if I am learning multiplication and I have 3 groups of 5, so 3 times 5, I'm going to see 3 groups and I'm going to see 5 dots in each one. And now I'm going to learn that I could count all the dots. Remember, count all. They're going to count all of them. They can go 1, 2, 3, 14. Third graders have to see it all. They have to know that we're still not like, we're not abstract. Like that really is 3 groups of 5. But then we quickly move them to, let's just count on. Level 2, let's count forward. So instead of counting 1, 5, could we just say that's 5, just like I put 7 in my head, just say 5, count on another group of 5, 10, count on another group of 5, 15. But now look what happens with my fingers. I want them to use fingers. So if you're singing songs for count bys, if you're counting in your transitions, which a lot of you have seen as you see me teach in the classroom, I always say, I want fingers because fingers count for the number of groups. 15. How many groups? 3. What's the equation? 3 times 5. Instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? That means you don't know your count bys. That's not a finger issue. Okay, you're trusting your one by one counting. You're not trusting your count on counting, which means we just need more practice. Okay, that is not a them issue. It is not a finger issue. It is a we lacked that instruction issue. They need more time with it. So I want you to be thinking about how can I be counting and practicing my count bys frequently, but use your fingers. It's how we keep track of the number of groups when we're doing count bys. That, of course, turns into more efficient because, example, my fifth grade teachers, they do not want their fifth graders doing 9 times 8 and thinking, well, 9 times 8, let's count by nines 8 times. There's my 8 fingers, count by nines, 9. 8. They don't have to start with 9. So I say, well, 9 times 8, look at the 8. I have 8 groups of 9. See it here? 8 groups. What do you know quickly? They're like, well, I know 5 groups. Exactly, because I've been doing groups of. 5 groups of 9 is 45. Now count forward. Okay, so now we go 40 and we count forward from that group, just like we did when we made a 10. We said 8 plus 7. Okay, and we make a 10, add 5 more, makes 15. We used our fingers. We just use them more efficiently. So we start to teach kids that we can decompose, use your fingers to decompose, but now we're counting in groups or in subfacts versus always counting by ones. It's the counting by ones that gets us into trouble. Okay, so looking here, it's not a question of should students use their fingers. The better question is, how can students use their fingers efficiently? Please use your fingers. Let me show you how you might use them even better, okay? More effectively, more efficiently. That's the question I want us to ask our students instead of saying, stop using your fingers. So when they're under their desk and they're using their fingers under their desk, I'm like, bring those suckers out, okay? Put them back on top of your desk. I want you to use your fingers. Don't be ashamed of it. I use my fingers. Show me how you're using them to count. Oh, that's so interesting. Do you see what Rachel's doing? Let's talk about how Rachel's using her fingers. That's really a great way to use them. I have to bring it out in the open so kids stop thinking it's a bad thing to use their fingers. It's not bad. So here's your next steps. Think of how you can help students use their fingers effectively and efficiently for whatever skill you're about to do. And then I want you to think about getting additional support. If you're already in the Math Genius Squad, you know this. I'm giving you these clues and these tips in the videos and on your lesson slides. I'm saying use their fingers. I'm teaching you for your quick practice, your daily routines, how we finger flash on the left and then we finger flash on the right. We go 10s and 1s. We are going to use our fingers and our hands kinesthetically all the time in our lessons. So if you need additional support thinking, I didn't even realize that that's what we should be doing, or I need the visuals to go with what you were just saying, guess what? I already have them. They're already there in the squad. And what we include is that scaffolded support. How do students use it better? So my friends, we wanted to talk tonight about counting and using your fingers. So we're going to wrap up. Again, so glad to see you. Let me know if things come up for you this week. Have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.